Whenever we talk about corruption in Pakistan, it's so easy to focus on the latest scandal, right? But what if the problem isn't just a few isolated cracks? What if the entire foundation is the issue? Well, a recent diagnostic report from the IMF suggests exactly that. This isn't about a few bad apples. It's about the very system they grow in.
And this, right here, is the IMF's core diagnosis. You really have to pay attention to the words they're using because they're crucial. Deep-seated, structural. That tells you this isn't some surface-level problem. And terms like fiscal opacity and rent-seeking, well, they're basically saying the rules of the game are designed to be exploited. It affects everything, from how taxes get collected to how laws are enforced.
Okay, so this number, 10%, this is a huge, huge piece of the puzzle. It represents Pakistan's tax-to-GDP ratio, and let me tell you, that is one of the lowest in the world. Now, this isn't just some boring statistic. Think of it as a gaping hole in the national budget. It's a massive symptom of a system that's just drowning in evasion and complexity, and it ends up starving the state of the money it desperately needs to function. All right, so let's really dive into the diagnosis itself. The IMF's report basically puts in black and white what many have suspected for a long time. Corruption isn't just some occasional problem in Pakistan's governance, it's an endemic, deeply ingrained part of the whole system. It's almost like a perfect storm, a recipe for corruption. You start with a heavily state-run economy. Then you add a maze of incredibly confusing rules. And then you remove any single effective watchdog. What's the result? You get a system that doesn't just allow corruption, it actively sustains it. And in the process, it just completely erodes public trust. So if the system is broken, how exactly does it fail? What are the actual mechanics, the nuts and bolts that keep this cycle of corruption turning? A key concept we have to get our heads around is rent-seeking. I know, it sounds a bit academic, but the idea is actually simple and incredibly destructive. It's when someone uses their influence, their public position, to bend the rules and just grab a slice of the economic pie for themselves, without doing anything to make that pie bigger for everyone else. It is pure extraction, not wealth creation. In this process, it often follows a very clear path. First, public power is used to create this web of complicated regulations. Then, well-connected, powerful groups, what we call entrenched interests. They capture the process of how those rules are actually applied. And the final step is simple. They use that control to extract private gains, just pulling money out of the economy for their own benefit.
Now, a system like this can only thrive when the fundamental guardrails are broken. It all starts with a weak rule of law, meaning you can't even count on contracts being enforced fairly. That dysfunction just trickles down, enabling everything from bureaucratic collusion and how taxes are collected to, and this is critical, the political capture of the very agencies that are supposed to be fighting corruption. But here's the thing. After diagnosing the problem so thoroughly, the IMF doesn't just walk away. It actually offers a detailed blueprint for reform. So let's take a look at what that plan actually involves. The IMF's plan is pretty comprehensive. It targets the problem from a bunch of different angles. On the money side, it calls for simplifying the tax code and digitizing compliance to close loopholes. On the governing side, it's all about making government contracts transparent and setting up truly independent regulators. And the whole thing rests on strengthening the courts and legal frameworks. And that point about the judiciary, that is the absolute cornerstone. An independent court system is the ultimate backstop. Without fair, impartial judges who could hold powerful people accountable, any other reform you try is basically built on sand. That's why the IMF stresses that transparent judicial appointments and modern laws are totally non-negotiable. Crucially, the strategy also involves a fundamental shift in mindset, moving from just reacting to actually preventing. So instead of only chasing corruption scandals after they happen, the goal is to stop them before they can even start. This means using data to map out high-risk areas and, importantly, making sure the leaders of anti-corruption agencies are chosen for their merit, not for their connections. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most difficult part of the story. We have a diagnosis, we have a blueprint for a cure, but the ultimate challenge isn't the plan itself. It's putting that plan into action against powerful forces of resistance. So what's the real obstacle here? The plan seems logical, the goals are clear. Why is it so incredibly hard to actually make it happen? Well, the answer is simple, and it's pretty stark. The real obstacle isn't technical, it's political.
The very same people and groups who benefit the most from the broken system, the entrenched interests, the powerful elites, the colluding bureaucrats, they're the ones who are going to fight the hardest to keep it broken. To really understand this struggle, it helps to use a metaphor. I want you to think of Pakistan's governance system as a massive and very, very leaky dam. The cracks in this dam, those are the systemic problems we've been talking about: weak institutions and widespread corruption. But the cracks aren't the whole story. The real force is the relentless pressure of the water pushing against it. And that pressure, that represents the vested interest in elites who are constantly working to widen those cracks for their own gain. So the IMF has provided the blueprint, the high-grade concrete, to repair the dam. But you can't just pour concrete into a crack while water is gushing through. For the reforms to set and to actually hold, you first have to reduce that pressure. You have to confront the political resistance that wants the dam to stay broken. Ultimately, this is what success really looks like. It's not about patchwork fixes. True, lasting change means rebuilding the entire structure, making accountability inescapable, and methodically taking apart the networks that have profited from secrecy and complexity for so long. So the technical plans to fix the problem are on the table, they're clear and comprehensive, but the most important elements, well, you can't find that in any report. The blueprint for repair exists. The fundamental question that remains is the political will to build there?